What's going on, guys? This is Cards Hub 365 on February 22nd. Joe Roderick, Brenden Schaeffer here with you on Sports Hub STL, supported by Gray Bar and all of the post-game shows today, brought to you by Hot Shots. Brenden, the Cardinals just wrapped up their first spring training game of the season, but that's not what we're talking about today, because before the game, John Denton came out with a brand new story. A few others have also tagged along with that as well. The Nolan Arenado trade talks back on the table. You were down there at Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium. What is going on down there with Nolan Arenado?
Yeah, some interesting stuff there from John Denton, as Joe, the Astros potentially now back in, according to Denton's sources. And this would be interesting, too, because you would think if this is a deal now that Nolan Arenado would reconsider relative to where he was earlier in the offseason back in December when he rejected the trade. He blocked it, but it was widely reported that it was more of a not right now from Nolan, not a never want to go to Houston. And, of course, Katie Woo's article earlier this week explained that one of those 5 teams that was on Nolan's acceptable list for a trade was the Houston Astros. So the fact that, John Mozeliak pursued it to begin with makes sense, given that little bit of information that, yeah, it was one of the teams that he said that would be acceptable. When push came to shove, the first time wasn't ready to do it, because at that point in the offseason, he still thought that maybe a team that he would have preferred, conceivably, would have jumped in. When that didn't happen, obviously he showed up here at Cardinals camp. But if the Astros are back in, Joe, would kind of make sense that they'd have the framework of a potential deal already put together, right? Like they did this once. Maybe this time it would come together if all parties are willing to kind of go back to the drawing board.
We want your thoughts as well as we do the show here today. First of 5 shows on Sports Hub STL here on this Saturday. Subscribe to the YouTube chat and give us your thoughts on the news today that is being reported by John Denton and others to this. So one of the big things, and you mentioned the Katie Woo article, one of the big things that kind of had Nolan Arenado kind of against going to the Astros initially was it was right around the same time Kyle Tucker was traded to the Cubs. Well, now that Christian Walker is with the Astros, kind of looking at what that team might look like. Alec Bregman not going to be back. The Astros decided not to re-sign him. He's with Boston. That third base position is open. But the Astros still, you look at what they have lost. Sure, they have Christian Walker, who's a really, really good player, the second best first base option out there on the free agent market this offseason outside of Pete Alonso. But they also traded Ryan Presley to the Cubs. They traded Kyle Tucker to the Cubs. They lose Bregman. Is this really a team that is moving forward? Is it a team that that is in contention to compete in the American League as a whole, that would give Nolan Arenado that sense of security of being on a competitor?
That's obviously the question at this point, Joe, as to whether or not Arenado would find it acceptable this time. And it's really, camp has started, games are going, and all of this is still happening when we had sort of mentally put it out of our minds. Look, I think it would speak to the extent to which Arenado really would like to be with an organization that's really trying to put all feet forward on trying to contend and win now. But like you said, like there are aspects of what the Astros have done this offseason that I think the first time certainly had Arenado sort of wondering, like once they traded Kyle Tucker, is this just another organization? And I'd be uprooting my family and doing all these things to change teams just for a situation that's maybe not too dissimilar to the one that I'm already in. I don't really think it's a commentary from Arenado on his teammates or the players of the Cardinals. It's more organizational direction over the length of his contract. Is there one situation that reads is better than another, I think is what this would all boil down to. But just my kind of reading of the tea leaves, Joe, if this is something that is gaining momentum again, I just don't think that would happen unless they had some belief that Arenado would be willing to maybe say yes this time around. But like I said, that's just speculation on some news that just dropped earlier today.
Yeah, as far as uprooting himself, it is kind of ironic that the talks right now are with the Astros. let's just say this trade happened within the next 24 hours. It's not like Nolan would have to find somewhere new to live down in Jupiter. The Astros train about 15 minutes up the road in West Palm Beach. So it wouldn't be a huge shock to him over the next 5 weeks. But yeah, he'd probably have to find some real estate down in the Houston area outside of living in St. Louis. But as far as business as usual goes, he just has he just has to drive to a new facility right here in right down there in the same area for the rest of spring training. So not totally a difference with that. It just you have been there for the entirety right now of spring training. You have listened to Mo talk. You have listened to the players talk. Take me through what you think it would do to this team's psyche right now, to where Nolan shows up on Sunday, he talks to the media, he practices for a week, he plays today. What does that look like, do you think, in that clubhouse if now suddenly he goes away?
It's interesting to kind of figure the way that would play out, Joe. I mean, from Arenado's perspective, playing in that stadium in Houston, where I think he would do pretty well there from a power perspective. The short porch with the Crawford boxes would help him out quite a bit. From the Cardinals' perspective, the way that they would look to move forward, I think it would kind of go back.
We lost Brenden there. We'll try to get him back on. I know he was talking about his Wi-Fi down there in Jupiter being a little off, but it looks like we do have Brenden back. No worries. You were talking about the stadium down there in Houston and how it would
Sure,
how it would benefit Nolan.
Yeah, I think that would be a big benefit to him, as I was trying to say there, and dealing with some tech issues. But from the Cardinals' perspective, Joe, I think you can go right back to the well on what we thought would be the case coming into spring. Nolan Gorman would be your third baseman. Donovan would play a lot of second base, and you'd now have room for Alec Burleson in your everyday lineup as a DH. The lineup that we saw today, I think with Arenado in it, is very close to what you might be seeing on opening day for the St. Louis Cardinals. But if Nolan were to depart from that lineup, it would obviously change things sort of back to the notion of giving these guys the runway, the younger players that we have heard a lot about this offseason.
Let's go to the YouTube chat and see what the listeners and the viewers are having to say. Walt Mosby says, to assume trade talks are back, you also have to assume that they ended. Do you know for a fact that trade talks on Arenado ceased? Brenden, you were there when Mo talked last week. You were there for his first talk. Do you sense that at some point John Mozeliak and the Cardinals said, you know what, hey, we're moving forward and we are no longer taking calls on Arenado?
No, I think they always would have been willing to take calls. Were they as aggressive making them anymore is maybe a fair question, because Mozeliak worked pretty hard on this. And as it was reported by Katie Wu earlier in the week with The Athletic, they had a deal done, and it was with a team that was on Nolan's list. So I think from Mo's perspective, he thought then that this thing, then when it wasn't, that's kind of a bitter pill to take. And so how much energy are you going to invest in circling?
Back to the chat we go. Keith chiming in saying, please do this. It's time to see what we have with this youth movement and move them along. That's kind of what you're talking about with the move of Nolan Arenado and everything that it opens up with Gorman to third, with Donovan to second, and everything else. You know, Ryan Fagan and I sat here and talked yesterday about the center field position and just how, you know, Nolan Arenado being on the team causes that log jam now in center field, because the way everything shifts around, ideally you would assume that it does put a player like Lars Nootbaar in center field, who we'll hear from later on in the show today. But you assume it puts him in center field when you put your ideal lineup out there. So yeah, it is a log jam that would open up so much for the Cardinals moving forward. And I think we're still struggling a little bit with Brenden there. I will get back to the chat when we get him back on, and it looks like the connection looks a little better. Hey, want to let you know that coming up on Thursday, we have our Hot Shots kickoff party, and all of the post-game shows are brought to you by Hot Shots. Mark your calendar for the night of Thursday, February 27th for the Sports Hub STL kickoff party. The event will take place at the new Hot Shots on Lindbergh in Lime. Come out and meet the Sports Hub STL team. Enjoy great food and drink specials. The party will start at 6 o'clock as the Blues drop the puck on the road against Washington. We'll watch the game together, have great prize giveaways, and the Blues Hub post-game show will broadcast live on site immediately following the game. That's Thursday night, February 27th, starting at 6 p.m. at the new Hot Shots on Lindbergh in Lime. Hot Shots, St. Louis's home for all the games all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshotsnet.com. Waiting for Brenden to be able to jump back on with us as we as we go out there to the chat. I will tell you this. So one of the questions that just came through, what do you think the Cardinals will get in return? Nothing. I don't think. I think it's been clear from the beginning, trading Nolan Arenado has nothing to do with what you're going to get in return. It has nothing to do with the prospects you're going to get. It has nothing to do with what the future of the team looks like. The future of the team is here. It's the players that you have in the system and that you're going to have on the roster opening day, plus a JJ Weatherholt, plus a Chase Davis, plus some of the other names that we have heard about so far this year. It's purely to drop the salary. It's purely to drop the money that the Cardinals are spending right now on Nolan Arenado. It's purely to open that up a bit and have that extra spending for the future when Chaim Bloom takes over as GM and when the Cardinals continue to move towards this youth movement. So it really has nothing to do with the return that you're going to get for trading a future Hall of Famer like a Nolan Arenado. It's that financial flexibility that they're going to have once it's complete, and then opening up everything else for that youth movement. So if you're digging through the Astros minor league system as a trade rumor like this starts to heat up again, you're doing it wrong. You're going to, because any player that comes back is not going to be somebody that has an impact on the Cardinals 2025 team, 26, 27, whatever. It's purely about the money they will get and what they will be able to do with that. Would you agree with that, Brenden?
I would. I'm trying to see if I've got you here, Joe. I think it would be more about the finances, and I would be curious if the Cardinals would be hoping for the same arrangement they would have had with Houston the first time financially, because they were going to take on reportedly 50 some odd million, and the Cardinals were going to pay just about 15, I believe it was. So that Cardinals would love to see happen the same way. It just has the leverage changed a little bit, knowing the Cardinals' position on this, and Houston maybe could get even a better deal than they would have before. But prospect-wise, I don't think you're going to necessarily be banking on big names coming back to St. Louis if a deal happens.
As Esteban Yan, former Cardinal reliever, chimes in on the YouTube chat, let's rip off the Band-Aid and trade him. I want Gorman to play every day. Let's see what we got with him. I'm the same way as far as Gorman goes. Any scenario that you look at with the Cardinals having success in 2025, 100%, if you look at this team, and I know we've kind of thrown out the best possible scenario a few times, and I've thrown out the 5 games over 500 in June type of scenario. If that's happening, that means Nolan Gorman, that means Jordan Walker are both hitting. So if that's the case, that's the positives that's coming from that.
Yeah, and that would be ideal for the Cardinals. And look, Joe, even if that doesn't happen, even if those players get the runway and don't perform, I still think you learn something if you're the Cardinals. Like, that's the way you can look at 2025, is saying, okay, Nolan Gorman has had his volatility, his ups and his downs. But as you kind of get into thinking about the next era of Cardinals baseball, which of these guys are going to be along for the ride, to find out whether the answer is yes, Nolan Gorman, or yes, it's Jordan Walker. I'm not saying you're just only giving these guys one more summer and then you have to decide, but hopefully 2025 moves the Cardinals a lot closer to making those determinations about a number of players. And even maybe in the camp of like a Brendan Donovan or a Lars Nootbaar, guys that historically would be extension candidates right now, but because the Cardinals are having the transition to a new front office, maybe you're saving a lot of those decisions for next off season. What do those guys perform like this year? to kind of find a way for Chaim Bloom to make some decisions about the present and then the future of this organization.
A few more minutes here on Cards Hub 365, supported by Gray Bar, the post-game edition, sponsored by Hot Shots. Brenden, baseball was played today, and we did see the first use of the ABS as that is being implemented in spring training games. It was Lars Nootbaar who made the first challenge of the automated balls and strikes, and he won. And you had a chance to catch up with Lars Nootbaar after the game, and here is what he had to say.
Pedro and Hells had it on the iPad?
They had it on the iPad, yeah. So you can't look and then, obviously tap it. You gotta do it right away. But second at bat of spring, you don't know exactly where your eyes are at, where everything's at.
Sure.
Tapped it, kind of just did it, and then looked over, and I was like, oh, crap, what's going on? And then they were all hyped up, and then when it happened.
So, Brenden, you had a chance to talk with Lars Nootbaar. I know that you said about 5 minutes or so afterwards. What is the general feeling after seeing that in person down there at Roger Dean?
Yeah, it was kind of funny to hear from Nootbaar. Ollie Marmol's stance was, hey, if you think there's a big-time situation within your at-bat to challenge, that it makes sense, and go ahead and give it a shot. And it was funny to hear Nootbaar say he wasn't really sure whether when he tapped the helmet he was going to win that challenge or not, but he kind of peered into the dugout and then saw those teammates with the iPad that were saying, hey, it's down, you're going to be in good shape. And so he had a pretty funny reaction. He also talked, too, about maybe needing to work on the etiquette, because it's not like you're going to bat flip a walk. You're not trying to show up the home plate umpire by any means. And Newt actually said he prefers this potential challenge system to straight robo-umps because he likes the idea of umpires having their influence over the game and continuing to build relationships with umps around the league. He thinks is an important part of it. But, yeah, everybody kind of figured Newt might be the first one to take a crack at a challenge, and we all pegged it properly. He did, and he won, and it was cool, too, to see the Cardinals battery win later on from the pitching side of things on a pitch that was called a ball but should have been a strike. So a couple of wins for the Cardinals in that regard, even if they didn't end up winning the game today.
Tell me, I saw many Cardinal media members talking about this, saying since Matt Carpenter's not there, Lars is going to be the first one to challenge it. What is it about Lars Nootbaar that made him the candidate to I guess challenge the pitch for the first time? Brenden, you there?
I'm going to give it a whirl, Joe, and you can hear me, let me know. But I think it was a sense of Lars Nootbaar knows the strike zone, and he talked with Matt Carpenter about some of these aspects last year and said, you don't want to be the guy that extends the zone on a pitch that isn't a strike, and that is something that frustrated Matt Carpenter at times throughout his career with the Cardinals because he almost knew the strike zone better than umpires. Like, yes, he would stand there a lot of times, and it would frustrate fans when he would get called out on strikes, but at the same time, more often than not, it seemed like Matt Carpenter knew what he was talking about. I think Lars Nootbaar has a similar batting eye, and this is one of those things he said, hey, I would be an advocate for MLB using the challenge system. Keep the power in the hands of the umpires for most plays, but when there's something that's really important, it gives the batters an opportunity, and the pitchers as well, to be able to have their say and see if what they thought was the case on the field ultimately matches up in reality.
We'll have more tomorrow on Sports Hub STL on Cards Hub at 365 as you, Brenden, will be back again for your last report from Jupiter, Florida, following the game tomorrow. So we will have your thoughts on that. And who's pitching tomorrow? Who's on the mound for the Cardinals?
Very much looking forward to tomorrow. It should be a lot of fun. One more Grapefruit League game, and kicking things off here with the post-game shows for Sports Hub STL is a good, fun time.
Yeah, we have the Bills Hub post-game show coming up in just a bit. That will be with Randy Carricker, Matt Rocchio, and Bob Ramsey coming your way today. And then later on tonight, it's Blues Hub post-game, Mizzou Hub post-game, and City Hub post-game. Looking forward to all of those shows here on Sports Hub STL. Until then, for Brenden Schaeffer, I'm Joe Roderick. This has been Cards Hub 365, supported by Gray Bar, right here on Sports Hub STL.